Hello, hello. So good evening, everyone. Let me see. Maybe we wait another minute because there is still people coming. How many people are we? We are already 25, 26, 27, 28.
You're invited to head over to the chat and tell us where are you tuning in from. We've got some India, Canada, Germany, Switzerland.
Exciting.
It's really fun.
Okay, so welcome everyone. Super happy to see you here, guys. Today it is a very special edition today because it's like we're kind of bridging a bit like Europe and India. Today is an amazing session, is an amazing thought lab for two special reasons. First of all, because of we have with us Srishti Sehgal, that she is like a learning design lead working for this very exciting startup in Bangalore that is called Next Leap, and it's amazing for me to have Srishti here, and especially also because of the topic, of course. And the topic is like a topic that for us guys, like for all learning and development specialists, is really like something that is very hard to grasp. So I'm really looking forward to learn something new today, because today we are going to speak about learning analytics, right? And basically what we would like to do is like to understand more what we can do when we speak about learning analytics. And today we are also going to speak about like a very strange version of learning analytics that is about learning museums. What is exactly learning museums, why they are actually important, and how can we use this methodology in order to leverage our learning experiences. So I'm really excited because it sounds like something like completely new, at least to me. I hope it will be also the same for you. Now, before to give the stage to Srishti, I want to just give you a very quick information about the fact that we would like to record the session. Okay, so please, if it is not fine for you, of course, keep your camera off, no problem at all. But of course, we would love to have a camera on if it's possible, because in this way we can make a session even more interactive, even more engaged. Okay, so let's make this session being a very engaging one. I'm super looking forward to it. So let's go for it. If you have any question, don't hesitate to ask. Let's learn something new, okay? So Tracy, now the stage is yours. I guess you can share also your screen and you can go.
Thank you, Giuseppe and Anna Maria. Thank you for having me here. Super excited for this session. I think today we're going to be talking about learning museums. What does that mean, and why should we be talking about it? We will sort of come to that over the course of the next 1 hour. A little bit about me as sort of the curator of this learning museum that we're all a part of. I started off as a craftaholic, somebody who was really, really excited about making things with my hands. That sort of led me to do product design in college, and got me to explore this whole idea of like toys for learning and systems and research. And a couple of years back, sort of discovered the edtech space, really loved working here, and have been working as a learning experience designer now. Would love to know a little bit about everybody who's in the room as well. So what I wanted to do is, if you guys can in the chat give yourself an identity card. So imagine if you were in a museum, what would your identity card say? So I try to make mine, and this is what it sort of looked like. It doesn't have to be about your work. It can be about anything at all. But would love to sort of get to know everybody in the room before we sort of move forward and really deep dive into the idea of learning museum. So we'll just take maybe a minute and I'll play some music in the background. And would love what your tag will be. Okay. Nice. That's finding. Yeah. World. Loving how many people have learned their tag. I guess emojis also can have some tag. Okay, so just to get everybody warmed up and make sure that behind all of these names that I'm seeing on the screen, there are some people there. But let's sort of, move on and talk a little bit about what's on display today. Since we are talking about a learning museum, there is an entry ticket that you will have to take, and we'll come to what that means. There are 3 galleries that we will sort of go through and explore those in our own ways. And then we have a little bit about the museum itself. Why does it exist? Why should we be here? And in the end, like all museums, we have a gift shop, right? Just something for you to sort of take back and take with you. And because a museum has rules, there are 3 rules that this museum has. The first one is that it would be great to have like cameras on, no pressure, but it would be so nice to see everybody. And as Giuseppe mentioned, you're under surveillance at all points, just like in a museum. I will be sharing one link with you on the chat. We'll talk more about that right after this. But I'm a total museum nerd, so I always go to museums with notebooks, and I'm going to give you one for the next like 1 hour for you to fill up and make it your own. And we'll sort of come back to it at the end of the session. And I think just the currency of the next 1 hour is curiosity. So would love to keep the chat alive with questions, anecdotes, ideas, stuff that you have done or you have experienced, things that are going on in your head. So would be great to see that so that we can make this a conversation and not just a one-way chat. And before we move on, because I am the curator and I can control how things happen in the museum, there's just going to be a small ritual that we'll do, and we'll come to what it means and what it does. It sort of talks about the 3 different galleries that we have. So if we can have some more videos on, that'll be great. It'll just take a minute, and then you can go back to switching your videos off if you want. I'll just wait another couple of minutes for some more people to switch on their videos. Yay, thank you, Sarah. Okay, so let's do this. There are 3 things we have to do. So the first one is this, eyes, right? The second one is hands, right? And the third one is heart. Okay, so we'll just do this at a count of 3, and we'll come to what this means. Okay, so eyes, hands, and heart. Okay, so this is a ritual. When you enter and exit the museum, you have to like do this, right? And that's just what it is. Okay, let's sort of move on and jump into. If you can share the link to the museum archive in the chat, Giuseppe, that'll be great. This is a Google Slides
Yes.
template. Just copy it, and we'll come to what you need to do during the course of the next.
Done.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, so we'll come to the entry ticket now, which is essentially just three like very simple questions. I think wanted to make sure that everybody can make the most of this session by actually borrowing from their own context, whether you're a learner, you're a designer, facilitator, teacher, wherever you come from. The first question is, what was the last thing that you learned, designed, or facilitated? So any last learning experience that you can think of, whether you were a learner or you were on the creator, facilitator side of things. If you can just take a minute to just write that down in your museum archives. And give me a thumbs up once that's done. And I can just play some music in the background till people are filling those in. The link for your archive is in the chat. Just duplicate that and upload it.
Giuseppe, do you mind having the music a bit lower? Because I didn't understand how to do it.
I don't have the music. So it's the one that controls the music is Shinti. So if you can please a little bit less. No worries. If you can put a little bit the music a bit exactly a bit less loud, is easier than to follow. Thank you. So can you please give us again some instructions on how you would like to go ahead?
Yep. So if you can open the link, let me just pull that up over here on the side. Yeah, so this should be the link, and click on file, make a copy of the entire presentation, and it should be there.
Okay. So give us some time to duplicate, to copy it. Yes, I managed to copy. Did you guys manage to copy the doc?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we'll answer the first question right now, which is,
okay.
Sorry. What was the last thing that you learned, designed, or facilitated? Any of those three? And just take a minute to just write that down.
Is clear, Lavinia? All good now?
It's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Just give a thumbs up once you're done, and then we can like move forward. Okay, Sabine, you're not able to copy the file, is it?
Yes, I did. If you guys have any problems, please let me know that I will also help you.
Okay, so
yeah, sorry, I cannot copy the file.
I think Anna Maria has shared a screenshot that should be able to help you.
Nice.
Okay, so folks that are done with the first question, let's move on to the second one, which is, how did you measure learning? So if you were a learner, how did you know that you were learning or you had learned something? If you were a facilitator or a designer, how did you know that, you know, people that you were designing for, that they were learning? How did you kind of measure that? Okay. And the last one, before we move on, which is, however you measured it, do you think it captured what you learned? Whatever it was, whether it was trying a new recipe or learning how to deadlift, anything. Did it capture whatever you did it capture what you learned? And why not?
You mean the tool that I use in order to measure the learning? The question is if this tool is or this methodology that I use, if it capture what I learned. Are you still referring to to the what I use in order to measure learning? Okay, yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, everyone done? Can we just do a quick thumbs up in case you are, so that we'll, okay, this step is done. Okay, looks like a bunch of people are done. So just remember, this is your entry ticket. We will need to see it at various points in time. So keep that handy, like keep an eye out of for this. And we'll move on to the first gallery, which is the gallery of eyes. Okay. Now the first thing that's on display on this gallery, yep, that's right, Anna Maria, gallery of eyes. So the first thing that's on display is actually something that I've taken from my personal Instagram account. A couple of years back, I started cooking a lot more. And in an effort to try and explore new recipes, document what I was learning, I started like putting them on my Instagram account just as these stories, right? So they sort of captured the process of a recipe. So everything from the different ingredients that I used to what the final dish came out to be. And when I was doing this, I honestly didn't care how many people were seeing this, but it was just became a part of my process of cooking. Took longer, and I made a lot of hungry people wait. But the idea was to sort of capture the whole process and the output, and also share a bit of like knowledge, like, you know, something as basic as putting cold water once you boil noodles, right? And it's still something that I go back to. If I have to cook mee goreng again, I will probably, this would be the place that I would go back to and refer among like other recipes, right? So this is the first sort of item that's on display. The second item that's on display here is actually by a 9th grade student called Arnav. He made these two memes on chemistry. And the entire, like his idea was he'd done this chapter in school, in his class, and his teacher had asked him to sort of capture his learnings using memes. And we were trying to explore this new medium that kids were so excited by. And seeing how that can be brought into the classroom. And for the life of me, this first meme, I cannot get it out of my head. Every time somebody says proton, neutron, this is the meme that comes up in my head. And it was great because these two were like one of the 20-30 memes that he ended up creating over like a couple of weeks. And the teacher that I was working with ended up being like, oh my God, like my WhatsApp group is just now flooded with all these chemistry memes that this 9th grade class is starting to create, right? The next one is actually more recent from earlier this year. There was an online course that I had done on audience building. As part of Next Leap, we have every Monday, somebody from the team sort of presents something that they've learned or something that they can teach others. And I tried to put together that week-long learning experience into something that I could teach others. I'm not an expert in audience building by a mile, but I tried to sort of synthesize my learnings into a half an hour, 45-minute session, which I could share with the rest of the group. And this is what you see are like glimpses from the deck that I had like put together, right? I think what's common across these three pieces, right, is just this whole idea of making learning visible, right? And how do you make learning visible? So in the first case, with cooking, the idea was to capture the process of cooking as well as the output, right? And share that in the form of pictures, in the form of annotations, in the form of videos. In the second case, it was almost a different way of expressing the content that somebody had learned. So the relationship between proton, neutrons, and electrons is something that seems very, something that you probably don't need to remember. But this image is something that you would probably never forget now, right? And in the last one, it was almost a way for me to revise what I had learned, summarize it, document it in a way that's easy to access, not just for everybody else, but also for me. Right, there were some resources that were shared as part of the course, but I think this sort of distills that in some way, and like I would go back and look at this deck rather than look at all those resources or even my notes from that 1 week that I attended the course. So yeah, this was sort of the first gallery. Now, want to go back to the entry ticket that you had, right, which was the last learning experience. How could you have made it more visible? Like, think of ways in which you could have made it more visible, whether that's taking a picture, shooting a video, writing about it. What could you have done as a learner or as a designer to make that learning more visible? We'll pause here for a minute so that you guys can sort of go back to your museum archive and add and just think about this a little bit. Anybody who's struggling, maybe you can share and we can all help you. Yep, go for it.
Yes. It's really easy for me to think about how I could have made my own learning more visible, but it's really hard to flip the switch and think about how I could have made the learning of others more visible.
Okay. What's your entry ticket? Let's hear it.
So the first entry ticket is about myself. I learned about causal loop diagrams and the iceberg model, and it's really easy because I already made it so as visible as possible, like actually sharing it in L&D Shakers. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is facilitating an intervision session for some people, and for this one I'm struggling.
Okay, so what was the session about?
The model is it's just a sharing session, so it was about learning experience design, let's say.
Okay, so you had to you facilitate a session around learning experience design.
Exactly, yeah, people had to share their experiences with learning experience design.
Okay, and this was happening online or offline?
Online, yes, online.
So what if and I'm just like thinking out loud here.
Yeah.
What if we had like something like a Miro board or a digital, whiteboard where people could, just write down at the beginning of the session?
We had that. Okay, that's.
So that in a way is like making whatever they were learning in the process, or whatever experiences they've come into the session with, visible to themselves and to others.
Okay, Anna.
So I had something very similar, a workshop, right? And I used the Miro board because you use something, right, in the virtual space anyways. If it's not a Google Doc, it's a Miro board, etc. And then I thought that workshop lasted 2 hours. There were a lot of sticky notes, there was a lot of activities, breakouts, etc. How about a 10 tips distilled from all of that experience in a form of a one-pager, very visible, with like 10 concrete tips that people can just take and use after all those 2 hours of like, wow, that's a lot. So like going visual, but also going more condensed, I think it's interesting.
Yes, that's cool. Okay.
I'm gonna do that.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, guys. I'll move on to the next gallery, which is the gallery of the hands, right? And the first thing that's in this gallery is my history folio from 7th grade. So I had an amazing history teacher in 7th grade, as you can see. And she was the one who wrote the book that we were studying out of. And at the end of every chapter, there was an activity that was, that we had to do, which sort of captured the essence of that chapter. So for example, this one was an account that was written as a foot soldier in somebody's army, right? And I can never forget the afternoon that I sat down in my grandfather's office with his typewriter trying to like write this down. And you can see all the errors that I've made and all the places where I've tried to write it again with a pen, right? And just burning it from the sides, making sure that none of the words, got away. And it's been what, 15-20 years, but I cannot make myself throw this. I still have this folio to the day, and it's just something that made me love history, not just for that 1 year, but for life. It's just something I can absolutely like never forget, the amount of time that I've spent like trying to create this. The second one is actually a super fun song, and I'm going to play like a tiny clip of it. That's written by an 8th grade student, Yug. So he reimagined the song Memories by Coldplay. So he used the same melody but changed the words to remember science formulae. So he had like chemistry and physics and like different things that he was not able to remember, and he really enjoyed music. So he wrote a song about it, and this video is of him performing that song at an event, at an online event, right? Here's to the shelters that we had. Cheers to the wish they were here, but they're not, cause the books bring back all the memories of everything they've been through. Toast to the tears of today. Toast to the tears that we lost on the way, cause the books bring back all the memories. And memories bring back pain. This time that I remember, when I did not know the pain. When I believed in having fun, and everything would stay the same. Feel like December when the teacher called my name. Cause I don't seem to remember the super fast switch offline. Yeah, everybody thinks sometimes, everybody learns someday. Hey, hey. That happy year is called by seconds. Hey, hey, hey. Here's to the shadows that we had. Cheers to the wish they were here, but they're not, cause the books bring back all the memories of everything they've been through. Toast to the tears of today. Toast to the tears that we lost on the way, cause the books bring back all the memories. Memories bring back pain. I'll pause here because this song is an earworm and it will haunt you for the rest of your life. But it was great to have him like write this song and then perform it in front of an audience of about 100 people at this event. And we almost had an encore for this. So he sang the song twice over in that 1 hour. But it's something that has like what ampere means, what the phosphate of lime is. Like, who would imagine that somebody could write a song and make chemistry and physics like this fun, right? The next thing that's on this gallery is, a workbook, not different than something that you're using as part of your museum archive that we used in one of the sessions at Next Leap. So we had a breakout room discussion, and we wanted to sort of make sure that conversation flows and people are able to take back not just from what their group has discussed, but also see what other people are discussing in other groups, right? So we had like just one slide for every group to fill up, and then that deck became like a collective repository for different groups to come back, because they were all talking about different traits of a good manager, right? And by the end of it, we had these 8 traits and like do's and don'ts for each of those traits that people took back. And it was like a piece of knowledge that people in the cohort created themselves, right? So this is sort of the third thing, and comes to sort of what we were talking about in terms of making learning tangible, right, in different ways. So in the first case with history, it was about visualizing and creating artifacts that help you sort of relive a lost time, whether that was an account of a foot soldier or the armor of a particular person in history, right? It was great to sort of relive those times by actually creating things. In the second case with science, it was a way to learn something that was like super boring and mundane, like formula, which nobody likes to do. And in the last one, which was more around like management and leadership, how do you like create knowledge from past experiences, similar to what you were talking about also, right? How do you capture stuff that people already know, but it's not documented, it's very tacit, right, in the way that it exists. And this workbook gave a good structure. It was fairly simple, just a slide that allowed people to sort of put that down in one way or the other, right? So we'll sort of go back to our entry ticket and think of how could you have made that learning a lot more tangible, right? So we'll spend maybe a minute on this, and in case anybody's struggling to figure out how, let's try and problem solve this together as a group.
Hey, Srishti, can I pick your brain on my particular? So
Sure.
the entry ticket that I started with was a curriculum on development management for rural women. That's what the thing that I'm even designing and facilitating. A couple of things that come to mind in terms of making it tangible. One are the assignments that they do. So they're actually documents or the blogs or field notes that they're writing. Other is, they can actually do a photo gallery of their outcome and people can take a walk. What beyond this? What beyond this?
So you mentioned like writing and blog and the photo gallery, right?
Yeah.
I think the photo gallery is actually a great example of making things like tangible, simply because you can actually go in and experience that time or whatever it is that those pictures are capturing, right? So I think that's a great example. I'm also just thinking in terms of if there was something beyond text that they could create.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know. What about something like a role play, right? where it's not tangible in the physical sense, but something that allows people to actually experience situations. Management is a lot about like the situation that you're in, how you act in that. Something like a role play that everybody sort of does together can also help in making it a lot more easy to understand and hands-on for people as well.
Right. I mean, now I think I'm also realizing I have put in videos and podcast recording of that as tangible. Yeah, this is helpful. Yeah, how do you keep thinking about modalities? I think that
the connection is not so good. The connection,
like,
if you can,
where all can get.
No, so Ravi, if you can please, if the connection is not so good. So Ravi, the connection is not so good. If you can leave the session and come back, then we can listen again to your question. Anna Maria, you have a question in the meantime?
I have an idea for
Wow.
Shuravi.
Shoot it.
Go for it.
So, can you hear me, Shuravi?
No.
I hope you can.
Yes.
Yes.
Can. I'm trying.
Okay. Awesome. So here's an idea. Never tested it. But so tangible. When you hear tangible, is like something that I can touch with my hand, right? But if we think of podcast, that's something that you can take away, right? So tangible. Let's imagine that it's something that you take away or you create somehow together. How about you're not giving them podcast, but they have to create a podcast to get a voice cast together. So you start with a prompt. One of them records whatever, like maximum 1 minute, passes it over to Giuseppe. Giuseppe listens to it, builds on top of mine, passes it over to Lavinia. Lavinia listens to what it's been said, and you collectively create a role play, an experience, or whatever, a takeaway session, blah. And at the end, you pack all of them together and bam, these are maybe everyone can share 3 takeaways. And the challenge is they cannot share the takeaway that was shared before. How about that? And then you have a full takeaway podcast that they can listen whenever they want to. There you go, idea.
Yeah, this podcast idea is fantastic because like it is collaborative and it keeps increasing the level. This is fantastic. Thank you. I've taken a note of this.
Okay.
Overall, I don't know if you, what do you think about it, but I mean, what I'm experiencing so far if I think about successful learning interventions and not successful learning interventions, there was always like a kind of main difference that it was if there was emotions involved. So basically, whatever we do, but if we kind of manage, and let me know what you think about it, but if we manage to foster the emotional part, so we make like people having fun or possibly not crying, but still, if it's something like emotional, somehow there is a very positive correlation with memory, this for sure, and also the learning overall become more impactful. So it can be that all this kind of stuff at the end of the day, they go in the direction of boosting emotions. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that like I'm a strong believer in like actually doing something with your hands. Like 5 years of design school here, that's all we did. And I think like just going back, the kind of emotions that creation evokes is really powerful, right? And I think this whole idea of like making learning tangible comes from there for me, in terms of like when you've created something with your own hands, right, whatever that is, or you spend time and effort to build something, you have a connection with that. So there is an emotion that artifact, that object, that podcast, that folio, whatever it is, right, that will evoke no matter what. Right. And I think that is, like you said, really powerful for learners and like people who are designing learning experiences.
Absolutely. Anna Maria, you have a request. I want to have what everyone else come up with. and so inspired by the examples. So does everyone else like concrete examples? More concrete examples, something that you actually currently using in your organization to make all of these more tangible.
Go for it,
Katarina.
Yeah, so I just learned about the models of organization from Frederic Laloux, the reinventing organizations. And I was wondering to either create like Lego prototypes where they are visualized in such a way where you see the hierarchies and all this stuff, or for example, to write manifestos for each of them. Yeah, this was just what popped to my mind instead of just noting down or going with these circles and yeah. So that's just what I personally learned. So yeah.
I love the idea of like Lego and like actually building something, knowledge, information, whatever. Yeah. Okay, I will sort of move on to the last gallery that we have, which is the Gallery of Hearts. The first thing that's on display in this gallery is actually from my time at design school. So at the end of, okay, I think the image is still loading, but at the end of 4 years of design school, you're supposed to have an exhibition where you present everything that you've done over those 4 years or whatever has survived of it. Right, so this includes like models. I studied product design, so there was a lot of like stuff like models and things that I'd created from my hand, but a lot of like posters, sketches, drawings. You know, this was a watch, a wooden watch that I'd made, bunch of stuff from like the very first year. And it like just going back and digging up these pictures made me feel like so nostalgic and just like I remember just like there was one whole corridor that I had to like take up to just put up all of this work. And beyond just me putting it up and whatever I was going through, I think for me, what was most interesting about that day is people. So this was right bang in the center of college in the foyer. And people coming and having conversations about it. So they would ask about what I'd done, why was it this way, what was I thinking, and in one way or the other, I had the option of like sort of exposing them to the process and the output that I'd created over the last 4 years, right? And it's such a it was such a pivotal moment because just this volume of work, you don't end up like doing this ever, right? Just seeing the work that you've done over 4 years when all you're doing is learning seems like a lot, but it was absolutely great to see this and have conversations around it. And a lot of people came back to me and said, oh, you know what, this I'm doing this right now and this gave me an idea. So it was great to have those conversations with people. And you know, use this exhibition almost as a way to lead to that. The second thing that's on display at this gallery is actually a website that Open House, an organization that I've worked for in the past, ended up creating. So all those memes and the songs that you saw in the beginning, they all came and were here. So every teacher could sort of see the kind of work that their students had created. And it also became a space, you know, a website that could be shared with parents, could be shared with schools. So it became a repository for the teacher, for the student as well, where people could come, interact, comment, share, like, and actually engage with stuff that people were doing and creating in, you know, their classes or as homework, etc. Right. The last one that's on display at this gallery is this writing challenge that I took up last year, which was a 30-day atomic writing challenge. We had to write 300 words every day for 30 days. And we were a part of a group where we would keep each other accountable. and sort of apart from writing, also published it and put it out there on my website, and had people like come back to me and talk about stuff that I was writing about. And for days, like the first 5-10 days, I was just like, I have no idea if anybody's even reading these things, or if these make sense, right? I wanted to do this to sort of get better at writing and build that muscle. But a lot of people came back to me and said, oh, I really loved your writing about fitness and about health, which were things that actually don't fall in my work. I would have probably never written about it had I not taken up this challenge, because I'm like sitting at 11:30 and figuring out, oh my God, what do I write about today? Right. And there were many days of that. But just being able to put it out there, and people reaching out to me led to this habit building made it a lot easier for me to build that habit, and made it a lot easier for me to like be more confident about like writing in general, right? And that sort of brings to the third gallery, which is how do you make learning shareable, right? In the first case, the idea was to sort of celebrate the progress and the outputs at sort of the end of the journey, right? 4 years of design school, everything that you've sort of learned along the way. In the second one, which was actually across subjects and across grades, it gave a peek into the classrooms. So a lot of parents have no clue what their kids are doing, but this gave them an opportunity to sort of almost peek inside it and see what was happening. And in the last case with writing, it was like, an example of learning in public, and actually publishing stuff that was out there, not just writing, but also publishing, right? Which was sort of took it to the next level. And I think, yeah, going back to what we've been talking about in your entry ticket, how could you have made it more shareable? Now, just a nuance here, shareability can have various degrees, right? So you can make it shareable within the group that's learning. You can make it shareable to like public and anywhere in that spectrum, right? I think depending on what you're learning, who's learning that, you can define what that audience is. But shareability, just this idea of me not learning individually, but me learning with a group and learning from each other. How does that sort of come together? I think that's what the Gallery of the Heart talks about. Yeah. Okay, anybody who's stuck and wants to brainstorm together, please, we'll be more than happy to help you.
I have a question. Do you think that this is like something that is true for everyone, or there are actually people that actually rather prefer to learn and don't share, and this is probably the best way of learning for them? There are also like this kind of, or do you think it's like a universal thing that share is something that it boosts the memory for all learners? What do you think about?
I think that's a great question. I feel like a lot of it depends on the learning culture. And I'll probably take an example here. This morning, I was having a conversation with a learner who's taking a course that I've been working on, right? And a large part of the course involved like discussion with peers and trying to co-create knowledge, similar to the workbook that we saw in the beginning, right? And he said, you know what, I'm a very shy person. And I don't like sharing, and like this whole like putting myself on the spot makes me feel really uncomfortable. But I've really enjoyed these sessions because of just how we've eased into it. So a lot of it depends on how you make it happen, and also the kind of culture that you're trying to create. I do also feel this is not one of those things that you should force at all, right? If somebody is like absolutely not comfortable, I think that, that's perfectly fine. But I think what I would suggest is, at a larger level, how do you create that culture of sharing and how do you create that culture of within each other and within the group. I think that's what's important. And I think I completely agree with what Sabine is saying, that it creates a lot of accountability, right, to share what you've learned, and to sort of master that. And also what Anna is saying in terms of being able to attract people who might either resonate with what they're saying, be curious about it, or you might not learn from them, but they might learn from you as well, right? So it works, I think, both ways. And yeah, completely agree with her that it helps you sort of make sense of the world.
Thank you. Sabine, do you also want to provide even more context about what you say about it? Because I really like this idea of sharing and accountability.
Yeah, I can. For me, it was really I have a personal example that I can give you. I was studying the Theory U book, which is a very big book on the learning theory, and I made an appointment with another group of learners saying, okay, I will get back to you with my learnings out of this book reading and represent it to you. So I could not hide and say, oh no, I don't read it finally because it's too long, and I will not do it until January because anyway I don't have time. So I really set myself a schedule. I will read this one and I will read this one, and then I gave my learnings back to the others. Without this kind of accountability that I gave to the team, I would have never done that. So it was basically through that accountability that I could provide my learnings and learn myself.
Right.
Okay. Now, just a little bit about the museum. I think a lot of it we've already discussed, but just in a nutshell, I think this whole idea of learning museums is actually where the eyes, the hands, and the heart sort of intersects. So visible, tangible, and shareable. And I think a lot of the examples that we've already been discussing don't fall in only one bucket. They fall across all three or all two, right? And I think that's where this whole idea of like capturing learning, being able to measure learning becomes sort of comes alive. Just to go back to some of the examples that we've discussed. In the first case, there were photos and videos that make things visible. This whole idea of like cooking and recipes and actually doing, creating and making all of this food is what was tangible. And the whole idea that it was on Instagram as stories and as posts is what made it like super shareable, right? Similarly, for the song by Yog, the whole audio video of the song, the lyrics were, visibility. His whole exercise of writing this song and the amount of time that it would have been taken is what was super tangible for him. And the way that he performed this song, the fact that people from all across the world are watching this video today, is what makes it like super shareable, right? And the last example that we did, the whole display, the models, drawings were the visible part. All the work that happened over the 4 years was the tangible part. And the fact that there was an exhibition that was right there in the college foyer for people to just drop by is what made it shareable. Yes, Anna.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but
No, go for it.
like as I see you analyzing each of these examples that you gave, it just crossed my mind that by taking the time to make your learning and your process visible, shareable, and tangible, because it's not something that we usually do. You sit with those learnings, you ruminate, you think, you mix and match, and then you're processing them longer and you're processing them at a different levels, or maybe in a different way. So I believe that even the process of trying to figure out how to do that is very learning rich after you've learned. So it's like a deepening of the learning, if you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great segue to the next couple of slides, which is what does this do, right? I think we've spoken about this, the fact that it aids recall. You're almost able to see a holistic progress over time, where you're not just looking at one part of learning, but you're looking at it at a larger level. And this whole idea of like becoming a part of a community and being able to see how others approach the same problem, and like what they react, we learn best from each other. And by creating learning museums, it allows you to do that to some degree. And it also builds a repository of work to share and like feel proud of. And I think that's a great feeling to evoke for a learner, in one way or the other. I think on the other side, which is for the designer and the facilitator, you're obviously able to see a much richer learner and like what they've learned over time. And you're also able to champion the individual learner to a great degree and their journeys and celebrate that to some degree. And by looking at individual learners, you're also able to better support them, and making like the work extremely shareable with other people to sort of learn from all over. So just a couple of things that work best, that add value to the designer and the facilitator. And I think just in terms of the different things that you can measure with this, you can look at progress, which is where is a learner in their learning journey. You can look at achievement, which is, what are the different things that they have accomplished in this process. You can gauge effort, and you can also gauge competencies, right, in different ways. So just a couple of things that you can measure. We've discussed a bunch of these in the past, but just different formats for you to try out: workbooks, mind maps, workshops, memes, blogs, and some platforms that you can also use, from like Padlet, Miro. There are some fun ones like Flipgrid and Flipboard, which allow video content similar to what Anna was talking about earlier. And yep, I think with that, we come to almost the end of the session, which is the gift shop. And I think if it's okay with you, we would love to see your museum archives. For whoever is willing, please do share it in the chat. I would love to see some of these, and we'll try and collate all of these in one place so that you can also sort of learn from each other and what everybody has been sort of thinking about. And with that, we will sort of do our ritual, which is what we did in the beginning. Now we know what it means. So it would be great to have some more cameras on, and we'll do the ritual quickly before we wrap up. Okay. Does anybody want to lead us?
Sorry. Then the hands, and then the heart. First the eyes, the hands, and the heart. This was so cool. Thank you so much. I have so many ideas going through my mind. I want to go back to all of the learning experiences and turn them into museums. Retroactively, like, hi, remember that training from last year? This was really cool.
Thank you, Srishti. I see already people that is leaving, but for me, it was, I'm sure also for the others, was really very insightful. I personally learned a lot. So thank you very much. Of course, thank you also to the L&D Shakers for organizing this session. Please, let's connect also with Shinti in the future. Let's give her feedback. Let's stay connected as a community. Let's share between us if we have ideas. If tomorrow morning after the shower you have another idea, say, oh, I could actually share my learning in this way. Please, let's communicate between us. And because this is all about, right? The L&D Shakers is very much about the community. Let's make it happen. Again, for me, it was a great pleasure. Thank you very much. And see you next time, soon, very soon. Have an amazing day. Have an amazing evening. whatever, if you're in Europe, India, wherever you are. Have an amazing day and evening.
Bye.
Ciao,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thanks,
Bye, guys.
Giuseppe. Thanks, Srishti.